Hey, everybody, this is Paul with the Bloodline Podcast, and I have with me today some friends of ours, Bryant and Corey from Tall Timbers Outdoors, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their elk season so far. It is currently mid-October, and these guys have been on a few hunts already. They have a season full of elk hunting coming up still, some other hunts left to go, but they've got a few hunts under their belt, and they're going to tell us a little bit about it. Corey, Bryant, welcome, guys.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah,
You guys have had a good season so far.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's been a good year so far. Like you said, we've already got off to a hot start, and that's kind of our style, is to pack as many elk hunts as we can into the fall. That's where our passion is. So besides Corey and I, we actually have two other guys in our group of Tall Timber. So we divide and conquer, and we go out and hunt elk as many times in as many states as possible.
And that's how we came to know each other. We were followers of yours, and we saw what you guys were out there doing. We really liked what you were doing, and we found a way to partner up between us. And you can touch on that a little bit later. But Corey and Bryant, again, welcome. Thanks for being with me today. Corey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Alaska, so the outdoor mecca, and moved over to Washington to go to college, and met my wife here, and now have a family here in Southwest Washington. And over the last 10, 11 years, have done everything I can to just entrench myself in hunting and fishing. And after sports were over, I was really trying to focus my energy on something, and I just gravitated towards the outdoors. And that's about the same time Bryant and I met each other, and he was on the same route. So it was just a perfect little bond there, in the sense of, hey, like, let's learn everything we can about elk hunting and hunting in general. And the story from there just kept going to more and more hunts together. So as Bryant mentioned, elk is definitely the focus and what we're passionate about, but just excited to spend as much time as possible outside.
And you guys do. You guys spend a lot of time in the outdoors, you and your family. So how did you meet, the two of you?
Well, I think we met at 24 Hour Fitness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we met at the gym. We were both previous college athletes. So I think actually we met on the basketball court at 24 Hour Fitness. Started hanging out a little bit. And then, like Corey said, we both had done a little hunting and fishing kind of growing up, but we were both college athletes. So we didn't have as much time to really dive in until after college. And then we kind of were both looking for that itch to scratch after competitive sports. And it turns out, archery, elk hunting, and just Western hunting in general has been that for us. So.
Yeah, right on. Bryant, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I live in Southwest Washington here, not 20 minutes from Corey. It's my wife and our three young kids. And then, like I mentioned, my wife and I both, we grew up in Southern Oregon, athletes, but were in families that hunted and fished as well. So then when we started our family, we've kind of jumped in the same way of planning our year around elk and deer hunting in the fall, spending the summer and the spring camping, fishing, some spring bear hunting, and just kind of raising our kids the way we were raised. And that's the nice thing about the Pacific Northwest here, is we don't have the big giant bulls and bucks that you guys do down there, but we have a lot of opportunities, so we're able to get out every year and enjoy time outdoors. So,
and you guys do. You guys are out virtually year round. Practically hunting year round, but clearly in the outdoors quite a bit. So you guys do love what you do. You love hunting. You love the outdoors, and we're excited to be partners with you. Tell us about Tall Timbers and how that came to be.
Yeah, I had to actually look back because I figured this question was coming, but it was December of 2018. Bryant would probably admit I came to him and I said, hey, like, we're in this. When we tackle something, we're all in. And like we talked about, we're extremely passionate about hunting and just learning as much as we could. so that way becoming more and more successful. And end of 2018, I was like, hey, what do you think about filming some of these experiences we're having? And there's a little bit of back and forth and just like, well, what would that even look like? And so we started with the old iPhone. We went on a Frank Church wilderness hunt and filmed what we could with iPhones. That's on our YouTube channel. And from there, we're like, wow, that was pretty cool being able to look back and watch that whole hunt unfold, even though it's just iPhone footage. And from there, it's just a trickle down effect. We kept filming more and more hunts, and there's two more of our close friends, Kyle Gomez and Alex Zerbach, that are a part of Tall Timbers. And shortly after a couple years, they were on all of our hunts and got more and more camera gear, and now we're here where we are today.
And you're on Instagram as Tall Timber Productions. You're on Facebook as well?
Yep. Facebook, YouTube. So
yeah, very good. So yeah, filming your hunts, right? How cool is that? Documenting what you do. And you guys do a very good job with it. You've had some really nice productions come out, and we're excited to be partners with you. But we are here
Us as
today
well.
to talk about the beginning of your elk obsession season. You got a few hunts under your belt now, a couple nice bulls on the ground. So can't wait to hear the stories. Corey and I were talking offline. We thought maybe we'd start chronologically. So what was the first hunt you did this year? First elk hunt, rather. Yeah.
So our first elk hunt was a Wyoming archery elk tag of mine. And actually, as a group, like Corey mentioned, we have Kyle and Alex a part of our group, and that's being a group of four is nice because we can divide and conquer. And actually, Alex and Kyle started their hunt first down in New Mexico. So they went to New Mexico to archery elk hunt down there, and then Corey and I headed to Wyoming on my tag. And I had my wife and I had our third child this year, August 15th. So I wasn't really planning any big out-of-state hunts, so I decided to apply for some really tough to draw tags with not enough points to draw them. And, sure enough, I ended up with a great elk tag in my pocket in Wyoming for this year.
Yeah.
Heading Corey and I off to Wyoming, and then actually a family friend of mine named Cody met us there. So it was going to be the three of us to tackle my archery elk tag in Wyoming.
Yeah. Excellent. So what was the date? What was the opening date?
So let's see, the first day of hunting, I picked Corey up from the airport on September 11th. And then we got into the unit and kind of got a base camp set up. And actually our first day of glassing was on September 11th.
Okay.
Yep. And so it was pretty neat. We got a camp set up, and this unit was laid out in a way where you could kind of decide what you wanted to do, whether that was you wanted to pound timber and chase bugles and locate, or you wanted to get up into kind of some remote country and glass down into some steep, tough to cover, tough to access country for bulls. So we decided to just get out with glass, take some big glass, and get up into some of that more remote country to start with. Being this was a draw tag, I kind of wanted to see what we were working with and see if we could maybe locate, a bigger bull or definitely target some upper age class animals on this hunt. So
you had some varied terrain where you could kind of pick and choose what you wanted to be in. I imagine pines, right? You had some PJ, and that's probably where you settled in, I imagine.
Yeah. So that first evening, we did. We picked one of the more remote areas, and it's steep, rough in this area. You could glass a couple miles, but every north facing side had some timber. So we're looking for elk feeding out kind of into the parks and into the openings. And that first evening, after bouncing around a little bit, we did put our eyes on a herd of elk that had a decent 6-point, 15 to 20 cows. They were coming out right before dark, and it was a pretty tough to access spot. So kind of our plan from there was, we knew that herd was there. It didn't seem like anyone was hunting that area. but we were going to go back to camp and then cover some ground the next day and look over some new country. And actually, that next morning, we went to one of the more popular areas, probably, which was behind. We were kind of camped near a lot of other camps, and we ended up running into some other hunters. Kind of that next morning, we did see a nice bull and cows, but there were already a couple hunters moving in. So that of course reminded me of the area we started, where it was tough to access remote country, but we had the place to ourselves. And that, that's a pretty good feeling when you're in the elk woods in September and again, this is public land, anyone could draw, type area. So, yeah, we liked the ruggedness, but also the aspect that we were going to have that area to ourselves.
Yeah. So how'd that go?
Yep. So, we made the plan to as discussing as a group of, hey, let's go spend one more evening, now that because like I mentioned, that very first evening we had a couple hours before dark, but we didn't spot those elk until maybe a half an hour before sundown. So I wanted to get up there early, look over that area better, and really see what we were working with. So this is really the first full day of hunting, but it's in the evening. We got up nice and early. I think we had 3 hours of daylight left. And to summarize it, we pretty much observed a rut fest that evening. Unfortunately, the elk are about 3 miles away from where we were glassing. So I really multiple times wished we were down there right that evening, but it just wasn't practical. But what we ended up seeing was kind of 3 different canyons we could look into. And these were, not basically just each slope kind of combined, and each canyon had its own little herd with herd bulls. And these are 300 to 330 type herd bulls, multiple cows. And we probably saw, we were looking at bulls through the glass, watching them bugle, watching them wallow. There were 5 or 6 satellites sparring. It was just really a rut fest that we observed down in that area.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
We were joking at camp. We were like, we would pay so much to just be down there right now. Like the full-on rut fest taking place, so many bulls. And so it obviously got us super excited about the next morning. But we're like, why can't we be down there right now? So it was quite the image to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to paint the picture for listeners, we're 1,800 feet above these elk that we're looking at, and the only road access is where we're at, and it's up high, and we're looking a couple miles away down into the bottoms. So just, without planning to go out there with overnight camp and stuff, you want to look it over and make sure with that kind of tough access that it's somewhere you want to commit to.
So no roads to get into there.
Not in the bottom. Nope.
Trails, anything?
There was some horse trails. The trail was going to be a little longer access, which is kind of what the planning we went through that night. But the trail was going to be the easiest walking in there, but a little longer. So the trail was about 3.5 miles. And then again, you're covering about 1,800 feet of elevation down to the elk. So pretty rough country. And then probably that's why we weren't seeing other hunters. Cause I think there were plenty of elk in that unit and probably much easier to access areas, but we were always hurting, we're always looking for punishment. So
yeah. Well, the elite athletes that you are, a few miles in, it's no big thing, right? A couple 100 pounds on your back, strong legs.
Wasn't saying that during the pack out, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So opening day.
That was our first full day in the unit. I think the hunting season for archery elk in this area opened on the 1st or 2nd of September. So we were, we kind of targeted.
So it was already open.
Yep. So the hunt had been open. We targeted that middle portion of the month. We had the full moon to combat with, but Corey had another elk tag, which we'll talk about. But there's some other things to plan around, and it was a nice fit where I felt like, it's a hard area to draw too, and I didn't think we would have the effects of the full moon along with a lot of other hunter pressure, just because it's a tough area to draw. That was our first full day. That was the evening, but the hunt had been going for a week or so. So that night, we got back to camp. We around the campfire, we're looking over the 2 or 3 biggest bulls down in there that we saw. But we also knew there were a number of 6-point satellite bulls down in that area. And just kind of preparing our minds and possible backs for a pack out coming out of there, and then deciding how we wanted to do it. If we wanted to go down there for a couple nights, take a spike camp down in there, or if we just wanted to go light and fast for one day. And ultimately, we decided we were just going to pack very limited gear for the day. And that way, if we did kill something down in there that day with the 3 of us, we could make it out in one trip. Which, as you probably know, 3 guys with a mature bull, it makes for some pain and punishment. But
some heavy packs coming out of there.
But yeah, so we showed up the next morning. We started hiking about an hour and a half before daylight, and then it took us longer to get in there than planned, unfortunately. So we were hearing some bugles as we were approaching, but we were still a mile out. The sun had been up for a little bit. And as we got down where we could start seeing from about 500 or 600 yards what we observed from up by the road, there was a bull still bugling. It sounded like a herd bull kind of, but they had already positioned kind of up into some burn with some blowdown and into some timber. So in a little bit of a tougher part to access. But then we saw a lone bull, a nice 6-point coming across the ridge up above us. He was probably, 1,000, 1,200 yards away, but he was kind of headed into the bottom in a direction where we thought we could cut him off. So that was kind of the first plan. As we saw that bull, I still wasn't sure if I didn't get a good enough look to know, like, hey, that's a bull for sure that I want to shoot. But we could tell clearly it was a nice 6, and we thought, let's get down in there in the bottom. Let's see if we can call him in and go from there. So yeah, we moved into position, kind of positioned ourselves on the north side of the slope. And this is an old burn. We had burnt standing timber on our side, open face on the other side, and kind of a creek bottom with a green meadowy stuff in the bottom. So really picturesque elk country. And then the nice thing is about our side of the hill was very shaded. So we were in the shade. It helped conceal ourselves a little more. And then that bull, we assumed he had started working his way to the bottom, but we couldn't hear or see him. And, one of the reasons I was so happy to have Corey along for the hunt is Corey is a phenomenal elk caller. So he's called in a number of bulls that I've taken over the past 10 years. So, our plan was to kind of get set up. We'll get me and the cameraman out in front in the direction that we think the bull is, and let Corey start doing some calling, and we can adjust from there. So yeah, Corey, why don't you take over on where you started with your calling sequence?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we knew the 6-point was well within earshot. So we as Bryant mentioned, he set up in front of me, and we knew he was alone. We knew he was roaming. And so ultimately I hit a few soft cow calls, shortly followed by a little bit of light raking. And from there, he quickly piped off, which in our experience, if that's the case, like game on, game on for sure. So
lone bull, responsive lone bull, right? He's coming.
Yeah. So definitely got me excited. And I'm just back there behind the tree, and I don't even have a bow. And I'm like, oh yeah, here we go. So, but hit those, and from there, I just slowly built it up. A few more cow calls, a little more raking, and then I did introduce a bull to it as well, and hit more of a nonchalant bugle. And the whole time he's working his way towards us. So ultimately at some point, I was getting louder and louder, and he was getting louder and louder, and coming over the fold. I'll let Bryant chime in, but I see the bull to my right, and I see Bryant and the cameraman to the left, and I was like, I wish I have a camera right now, because I had a full picture of everything that was about to unfold. But the call-in scenario took about 15 minutes or so, just because we were so close to the bull already. But from there, of seeing the bull and Brian in the frame, Brian can chime in on what he was seeing from his angle. But I tell you what, I was getting pretty excited sitting there.
Well, that would be nice to have two camera people, one
Oh
behind
yeah,
you calling, right? Picking up all
yeah,
you're doing back there with the calls. That'd be really neat.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a distinctive change, and that bull, I think he was. Well, we saw him in the bottom, and he was not coming on a rope right away. But I think what happened
Mm.
is Corey was cow calling a little bit. The bull heard the cow, which, I mean, they hear cows all over the place, so that didn't really mean much. And then all of a sudden, there's a bull raking near that cow, and
yeah,
now that bull got interested, and then Corey bugled, the bull bugled, and then I can't remember. I think Corey was just raking and cow calling, but the next time that bull bugled, Corey bugled right over the top of him. And that kind of told that bull, hey, I have a cow that I'm being defensive of. And he was on his way.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I was able to spot the bull probably 80 yards away on his way in. And I let the camera guy know, Cody, hey, there he is. He's coming in. He got the camera on the bull. He was coming pretty head on. So I was a little concerned at first that I was going to end up with a frontal, which with, my setup, I'm not opposed to taking if it's close range. But I'm wondering now, am I going to end up with a frontal, or what's going to happen here? Fortunately, the bull turned a little bit and he started coming below us at about 50 yards out. So I drew my bow as he was probably 50 yards away, still coming pretty quarter to. And at this point, I was 80% sure I was going to shoot the bull. I could see he was, mature. He had a big body. I could tell he wasn't, one of the probably 340 bulls that we had seen the night before, but he was not a bull I wanted to pass up for a good opportunity. And then he came by us at, I mean, I'm not lying, under 20 yards
Nice.
below us. So, and it was actually working out perfectly because another key thing here is Cody and I had positioned ourselves just on a rise where that bull was going to start to see Corey's calling location. So what happened is that bull's coming below us and he just starts to get to where he thinks he can see Corey's calling location. So he starts to slow down and stop.
Right.
At this point,
he's expecting to see other elk.
Yep. And I'm
Yeah.
already at full draw. I've followed him while I'm at full draw down below us, and he slows down. And at that time, he gets below me. He's still quartering to, but he's getting more broadside and more broadside as he takes steps. But he's also slowing down because he's now starting to wonder, where are those elk that I heard? And I see a nice, a good 4th, 5th, and 6th split with pretty long beams. So I settled the pin. It ended up being about 18 yards. I settled the pin behind the shoulder, and I actually didn't even have to stop him because he had slowed down to almost stopping on his own, right behind the shoulder at about 18 yards, and I let him have it. So I put the first arrow through him. And I'm shooting a pretty heavy setup with a fixed blade head. That arrow went through so fast, actually, the camera guy thought I had missed the bull. But he runs out about 40 yards. He stops, looks back towards the calling location, because as soon as Corey heard me shoot, he started cow calling to kind of slow that bull down.
So you heard the bow go off, Corey.
Well, this is kind of tying back. This is where I can actually see Bryant, the cameraman, and the bull all in one frame.
You're seeing it unfold.
Yeah, I'm seeing. Yeah. I'm in a position where I can see him panning to follow the bull at full draw, and I see him smoke them, and I'm like, holy cow, that had to be close. At that point, I was like, that's got to be under 20 yards. And yeah, the moment that bow went off, I started hitting the calls as quickly as I can, just because, as Bryant laid out the scene, it has cover, but enough openings where if we could get them to stop again, I mean, for us, we always want to get another arrow in them if we can, just for certain. And so he hit the brakes, and what did he end up being when he hit the brakes, Bryant?
Yeah, he was around, let's see, he was about probably still only 35, 40 yards away when he stopped and looked back. I had loaded another arrow within the time that he was running off. And so the problem, he was looking our direction. I drew, and he kind of saw me drawing to take a second shot. So he started to move a little more, but then Corey called and he stopped again. Like, he's so rutted up. He has no idea an arrow's just gone through, his lungs. And he looked back. I took a severe quartering away shot at about 45 yards and put another one right in front of his back hip, and it went right up into the good stuff. And at that point, we knew he was done. He maybe went another 20 yards, stood there for a second, and we watched him fall over, which, as being an archery hunter yourself, if you can watch a bull fall over with a bow in hand, man, it's such an amazing feeling, because, there's just a lot. Those elk are so tough, and there's a lot that can happen. And when you watch them fall in sight, oh man, it just
it beats the feeling. Alternative, man. It beats the alternative.
Oh yeah.
Tracking and trying to find them over ridges, and oh boy, nice.
So I think the biggest thing that set in is we all looked at each other like, wow, we had the next 9 days planned to be here. And we've got one tag to fill, and we've got a dead bull laying 60 yards from us. So it was a little bittersweet, honestly. At the same time, having a new, month and a half-year-old infant at home, and a wife, handling the kids, I knew it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to get back a little sooner than planned. But yeah, it was a little bittersweet. But that was the kind of opportunity where, it was not the biggest bull in the unit. It was probably a top 4 biggest bull that we had seen in the day and a half that we had been there. But when you have that sort of encounter, and you're trying to capture things on camera, you talked about how cool it is to film hunts. Well, it's cool sometimes, but it also screws things up sometimes. And it's a burden.
It's a burden.
It is.
When you're there to capture the kill on camera, it becomes a burden for you.
Yeah,
I get it.
It's a lot of weight to pack around. It's a challenge, and
even though you have 9 days, there's no guarantee you're going to have another scenario line up like that. Despite your best efforts.
No doubt.
Yeah. And so I would.
So you got to make that difficult decision, right? Do we end it right now, or do we drag this thing out? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I was pumped to take that opportunity, and just, it also is, it was such an amazing encounter for the 3 of us. And there's no way we would remember it like we do now if I didn't shoot that bull. It would have just been another one that, that we saw. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Good fun. So you were talking about where Corey was positioned with respect to where you were at.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you guys were kind of close to each other. And on this year's hunt too, we did a lot of setups like that as well. And I think I just need to get farther and farther. I think next time, you learn a little bit every season. And I really think I want to get my callers back farther. So you just don't have that kind of issue that you're talking about where he can get past me, and now he's looking for that cow, that bull that we're creating over here. So
I mean, for us, it's so.
What do you guys think about that?
It's so terrain dependent for us. And that's, in this scenario, Corey, what do you think I was, 50 yards in front of you, maybe?
Yeah, I would say 50, 60 yards max behind Bryant. And I also agree. I think it's so dependent on the terrain. So obviously the topography, like what you have for for changes in the topography, rises, like he mentioned. He was elevated, so when the bull came through, vegetation, another huge factor in that.
Yeah.
So when we spend time in the Roosevelt country and the Roosevelt woods, we're pretty close to each other when we're calling, versus if we're in wide open
Sure.
country that maybe doesn't have that much diverse topography. Maybe it's flatter in nature, things like that. So we've just seen it really depends on where we're hunting and those factors. So
We
Yeah,
had a lot of setups this year where the caller was maybe 40 yards behind me, 30, 40 yards, and it's just too close. I think 60, 70 yards is a more appropriate distance. But
and
anyway,
the other thing to add to that is like Corey and I, especially as a shooter, we actively make moves if we need to. And that's what, when your listeners are able to watch this hunt, they'll see that Cody and I set up in one spot ahead of Corey. And then we quickly realized that actually another 25, 30 yards ahead of us was going to be a better spot to set up. So, that I think is, if you have a very capable hunter out front, getting them way out in front is not a bad thing because they can move and adjust as
yeah,
needed.
yeah,
That's the only challenge we've ran into sometimes is if you really set a hunter way out in front and that bull decides to take a different path on his way to you, he has a more of an opportunity to go around the shooter and make it to the caller without the shooter ever getting a shot.
yeah.
So yeah, it's terrain dependent. There's advantages and disadvantages of both, for sure. Just like everything, right?
What kind of bow were you shooting?
I shoot a Matthews Lift, 33 inch, and it's got 70-pound limbs. So I have that maxed out, and yeah, that's been a good shooter. It's a very forgiving bow. That's why I shoot a longer axle to axle. It's nice and forgiving. Yeah, and I've been happy with that bow this season. I've shot Matthews for a couple years, and I shot a Bowtech prior to that, and yeah, there's a lot of good bows out there, but I've enjoyed that bow this year. I think it's one I'll try to hold on to.
Yeah, good. And you
Yeah.
got a world-class caller as your hunting partner back there.
Yeah.
I don't know about all that, but no, we it's something that we enjoy. I mean, we're gonna do what it takes to get an elk down, but if the picture perfect scenario would be what we just described, when we can interact and call, and it's something that we picked up in the Roosevelt woods and translates obviously as we move farther east. So like I said, we'll do what needs to be done. We'll spot and stock like you'll hear later on in Montana, but if we have our perfect scenario, it's definitely calling elk in.
Yeah, for sure. And you're using Phelps calls.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed using those Phelps calls. We've used them for several years now. We obviously have our personal preferences. I love that Maverick reed. I was telling Brett about that, and so I like that Maverick reed, and then also the Gray Amp are my go-tos. So
Yeah, Brett came out with me a handful of times this year with his Phelps calls, and they sounded sweet. Such a
yep,
nice sounding call. And then kind of a funny thing happened. His Phelps bugle, the metal bugle,
yeah,
um, he didn't like it. And I lost 2 bugle tubes in the woods this year, which is just isn't that many for me. I only lost 2, but I had to run into town during my hunt briefly. An alternator went out in my truck, so I had to go get
oh
that
geez,
fixed. And when I did, I ran into town and grabbed a couple calls to replace the ones I lost. They were comparable, same model, same manufacturer, slightly different model, and they just didn't sound for me the way that the ones that I lost did. So I was like, these are satisfactory, these will work, but they're not as good as the ones I lost, but they'll make do. And then Brett was with me, and he's getting ready to leave after a couple of days of hunting with me, go back home, and he goes, "Hey, do you want this call?" And he shows me that Phelps metal. I said, "Let me look at that." And I looked at the mouthpiece, and it's a lower lip call, like I had been using my other calls.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked it up, and I blew it like Corey Jacobson, like Corey Toombs. I sound like Corey Toombs my
That's right.
first call. And I was like, holy shit, did you hear that? And I did it again. I'm like, that wasn't a fluke. Like, it worked to my advantage right away. And
Yeah.
and Brett's like, I can't get it to do that. So he goes, you can have it. So, man, I love that Phelps call, that Phelps medal. Yeah.
Yep.
And his cow calls sounded so good. So I'm kind of sold on the Phelps system.
Were
Yeah,
you,
the cool
go ahead.
Oh, the cool thing about those systems is because Corey and I call with a diaphragm reed in our mouth and then we blow through a tube. But those new systems, you got both options, right? You can remove the mouthpiece
Mm-hmm.
or you
Yeah.
can do the bite and blow.
Mm-hmm.
And diaphragm calls are kind of like, I could tell you that Phelps is amazing and it is for us, but it just has to fit your mouth well. And that's nice with the amp frame is they have the amp and the amp mini. So depending on the shape of your palate, you can find that diaphragm that works for you. But yeah, the versatility is nice because I'm a firm believer in the elk calls that no one thing works for everyone. You have to have some versatility to find what fits.
Yeah. Yeah. They have great tone. They sound fantastic. So yeah, I'm super excited to use them again. So how was the pack out?
Yeah, we kind of alluded to that. So it was a little bit rough. We got everything divided up, and we loaded everything into our packs. And our estimation was, this is a mature a 6x7 bull, mature bull. So our packs are running about 100 pounds a piece, right? Because we had water for the day, we have some snacks, we got our pack weight, and then we got meat. We did bone everything out, obviously, with what we had ahead of us. And what we had was 3.5 miles, and then, like I said, about 1,800 feet of elevation. The nice thing is I had shot this bull first thing in the morning. So we moved him into the shade. We got him taken care of. We had a snack. We're ready to start that pack out at like 11 a.m. So we had a lot of time on our hands, which is nice.
Yeah.
But it took us
Warmest part of the day. What was the temperature?
Actually, the nice thing about this area of Wyoming is it was getting real cold. It was getting below freezing at night.
Okay.
And I think the high for that day, Corey, if I'm remembering right, the high for that day was only 48 or 50 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember low 50s. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a
Nice.
phenomenal day for, just taking our time, getting that meat cooled off and then packing it out throughout the day. But yeah, it ended up taking us about 5.5 hours to go that 3.5 miles and 1,800 feet. So as you can imagine, that's, we started off making it about a quarter mile before we'd rest a little bit. But I also mentioned our buddy from Wisconsin that joined us to run camera. And I mean, I'm not throwing him under the bus, but he's not used to, and I feel like
the Rocky Mountains.
There's not many people we could ask to do that. And I was kind of telling Corey that I'm like, hey, we do this once in a while, but when it comes to this heavy of a load, like it wasn't the distance, it wasn't the elevation, it was that much weight over that, duration.
Sure.
But we made it. We had to adjust some things along the way, take a little weight off his pack, put it onto mine, in terms of our buddy Cody. But we made it out, and it makes, like I said, it makes it feel that much sweeter, when you're done and you can look back on that. And it also, makes the hunt more enjoyable for people to follow along too, because they can relate in some way.
Yeah. Can't wait to see the video. The video's not out, right? I mean, this is all forthcoming.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're going to try to get these first few episodes out before the end of the year here. We kind of go through all of hunting season and just film everything and then start putting stuff together right after. So
yeah, sounds good. I was telling Corey offline before we got started, the podcast is produced by a buddy of ours, Mountain Built Media up in Oregon.
Oh yeah.
Tyler. So he'll add B-roll and whatnot to our discussions. So once your video and your photographs are released and ready to go, we'll add them to this podcast, but we'll also put a link to the videos in the description once it's out as well. So
awesome.
Congratulations. Yeah. He's a great bull. Sounds like
Thank
a lot
you.
of fun.
Yeah, it was a good one. One we'll remember for a long time. So
So you got to go home. You got to go home a little bit early. I'm sure Mama was excited to see you, and the kids were excited to see everything and
Yep.
see all that and hear about all that. So what was next for you?
Next was Montana. So I was in Wyoming with Bryant, and Kyle was in New Mexico with Alex for those tags. And now it's time for Kyle and I to pick up the bows, and we had tags. So we were headed to Montana late September, going to blend into early October. I'd been Montana. I've been lucky on the general tag. So this is my third year in a row drawing the Montana general tag, and so I've been there a few times. But we talked as a group. Hey, we want to experience something a little bit different. Like we want to experience perhaps open country, like the breaks country, something like that. And so Brian actually did a little digging, did some research, and picked an area. And of course, again, we think, hey, this is a complete long shot. We have 0 points. Probably not going to draw bullets put in for it. Well, of course we draw. So draw a tag that we have no business drawing, and Kyle and I did it best we could. I mean, scouring Google Earth and OnX and talking to anyone and everyone that we could, just that, not even necessarily that hunted that area, but just similar terrain. I mean, very foreign, at least to me, on how open it was. And so
Yeah,
we
it might
did all,
require some different tactics, right?
yep.
Different approach. So yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to anyone and everyone that I could, and we went there with a pretty good game plan. We actually knew someone that had hunted, which is new for us as well, which was huge, but that had hunted the same tag the first week of September or the first week of the season. And so got some fresh intel in regards to what they experienced, and went over there. And man, I spent a lot of time looking at the maps, but when I got there, even just being there the first time, I was like, wow, this is like deer country through and through. Like, is there any cover for
Yeah,
these
it always
elk?
looks different, right, when you get there.
Yep.
So this is
Yep.
really wide open country.
Yeah, really wide open country, traditional breaks, Montana breaks country. And we get over there, and we start in an area where we have fresh intel, like I mentioned. And first morning, we're sitting there in the dark, and we knew there was a lot of tags. There's going to be pressure, but wasn't expecting this much pressure. So there's headlights everywhere. And but we're hearing bugles in the pitch black. And I mean, when you drive that far, I mean, I don't know, 15, 16 hours from home, and you go to a spot that you're like, I think this spot's going to be good. And you get there, and then the first thing you hear is bugles. You get pretty excited, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
All that e-scouting, pre-scouting worked out, right?
oh
Paid
yeah,
off.
yeah,
For him,
yeah,
for him and everyone else.
yeah, exactly. So lot of hunting pressure, but we are sitting on a glassy knob first morning there, and we're hunting close to the river, and we put eyes on several herds. But that being said, they're there for a reason. That come to find out. So they're in some real tough terrain. The
You
wind's
can't
very
get to them. Is that why they're there? You can't get to them.
pretty much you
Yeah.
can get there without a lot of effort. It's just once you get down there and you're making a play on them, the vegetation and plays out in a way where it makes it extremely difficult. They're going into cover, which out in the breaky country, there's not much, but down in these willows, they're like 10 feet tall, 8 feet tall, and they go into these willows, and you're not going to, after that, once they're in the willows, there's no chance. We spent a lot of time in the Roosevelt country. These willows are way thicker than the Roosevelt country that I'm used to.
Really?
So,
Thicker
yeah,
than the Pacific Northwest.
I was pretty shocked. So we get down there, and we spend 3 days chasing bulls in this area. And don't get me wrong, we saw some really good bulls. When I say good for us, just spend a lot of time on general tags, and We saw 320, 330 bulls. We saw one big bull that, talking with several people, we're certain it's 360 all day. So big bulls. And after spending 3 days in there, we're like, I don't know about killing one in this area. So we looked at other spots that we had mapped out, and let's just go spend a day on one of these spots that we like based off e-scouting, and just switch it up a little bit. We're getting our butts kicked in this area, and they're there, but getting one kill might be a different story.
If I could stop you right there, I'm
Yeah.
curious. You said you were talking to somebody who had hunted that same hunt.
Yeah.
Did they give you any tips for how you might try to figure it out in that terrain?
So the funny
What was
thing
the
is,
tactic? What's the pervasive tactic?
Well, the funny
You gotta
thing
hide
is,
you gotta hide in the willows, right? You gotta get them where they're coming in.
pretty much. So the funny thing is the hunt recap from the individual that had the tag was, I spent 2 weeks hunting big bulls in the willows and I didn't kill one. I said, okay, but there's
Yeah.
big bulls, so I'm intrigued. But he's like, I don't know how to actually kill one, but I can tell you where the elk are. So that was in the back of our mind when we spent 3 days, and I'm like, I don't know how you kill one.
And you don't want to repeat that.
No.
Yeah.
So,
so you smartened up and said we just need to move out of here, right?
Pretty much, because we also, again, there was a lot of pressure, and so midday we talked to a couple individuals that were hunting the same general area, and they had been there for 5 days, 10 days, and they also hadn't killed one of these elk. So we regrouped, and we're like, let's just see what else is out there. We've never been here. We've spent a lot of time scouring the maps, so we moved on. We moved on to a different spot, and it was going to be more in the more traditional breaks country, away from the river. And we get in there, and we're glassing some pretty good areas that we like, just off of our experience and scouring the maps. And we're getting some really heavy winds, which I've been over there deer hunting, so I knew that it's always windy, but we're talking 30, 40 mile an hour gusts. And so we're like, where would these elk hide based off this wind and food and water and shelter? And so we were sitting there glassing, and we picked out a spot. We're going to have to make about a 3-4 mile loop. But if there was elk in the area, we think they would be concentrating in this certain spot. Out of the wind, right? Out of the wind, good shade. It was, even though it was windy, it was hot, really hot. And so we make our loop. Well, we get to right above a spot that we were going to start looking at areas that we think they could be bedded in. And we look down, and
there's a 5-point bull all by himself. And so he's working down this ravine, actually down towards the river. And the wind was good in a way where Kyle and I dropped our packs and kind of circled around and got out of view, got good wind, and then dropped off the ridge to get into the ravine that he was in. And our thought was, let's get down from where he's going to be. The wind will be good, and he's just going to feed right past us, in theory. And so we get down there, and we're pretty much in the heart of the ravine, and we think this bull's got to be right around us somewhere. But there's these little folds that kind of hides, what essentially is hiding him. And I peek around this corner, and I'm on my right now, I have my bow down, I'm on my knees, I'm like inch by inch looking through my binos, but I'm only looking 70, 80 yards through my binos. And this bull decided to kind of hold up and bed right in the ravine. So we essentially came down too far, but he's only 45 yards from us. But he's bedded in a way that I don't have a shot. And we look at the topography, we don't really have a way to get any closer either without him seeing us or smelling us. And early on, I mentioned how hot it was. We're talking mid 80s, high 80s, and we don't get hot temps. We'll get some hot temps in the Pacific Northwest, but it's short-lived. And we're sitting there with no water, no food, no shade, right in the sun. And I turn to Kyle and I say, we might be in for a long haul because we're going to have to sit here until he gets up. And so we're right in the middle of the day. I'd say 1 o'clock-ish. And so there's going to be, in my mind, we might be here until 30 minutes, 45 minutes before dark.
What about a call? Was a cow call, soft call, not an option to get him on his feet?
So it did enter my thought process, and I just felt that he had no idea we were here.
Yeah, the element of surprise. Maintain the element of surprise.
Yep, and the wind was perfect because the wind was coming heavy out of the west, and it was consistent. And so no matter what time, we didn't have to worry about the wind shifting. Was the thought there. And there was a little bit of risk in my thought process to blow a cow call.
Yeah, 100%.
And so even though it might work, there was some risk where sitting there, I felt confident that he would eventually get up and he would eventually start moving down. And we were already within bow range. So we sat there for about 3.5, maybe 4 hours. In the baking sun, I was putting stuff over myself, just trying to get out of being sunburnt. And we sat there, and I was taking the approach every 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I would essentially get up and kind of turn. I was always sitting because of the topography. And I would kind of peek around the corner with my binos and just make sure that he was still there.
Did you see an antler tip? You could just see his rack? So you pick him up.
Pretty much. So when I would come around the corner, all I could see I would look through, and he's behind some vegetation, and I would just see his head and his antlers, and just confirm that he was still bedded. And well, we heard I still don't know what the noise was, but there was some type of noise that triggered Kyle and I, and I was like, "What was that?" And I get up and I turn my binos, and he had got up, so he hadn't moved, but he just stood up, and the bull's now on his feet. So now we've been sitting there for 3.5 hours, getting stiff, and we all get ready and start kind of peeking around the corner. Well, this bull got up from his nap, so to speak, and decided to rake a tree for 15 minutes in front of us. So now we're watching the show take place, and which was fun to watch. But at this point, we're pretty far into this stalk, and I'm like, really? Like, you can't just like move down the ravine and feed. Now we got a display. So he sits there, rakes a tree, and how his body was positioned in a sense behind some vegetation and just the angle, didn't quite have a shot yet. And again, the wind was perfect, so no reason for me to force a shot in there. And he does his thing, raking the tree, and I had already before all this, I'd ranged certain bushes, certain trees all around him. That way, if I got in a pinch and needed to make a shot quickly, I had some points of reference. And
nice.
He comes through. He's done raking, and he walks right into a lane where I had ranged a bush in front of him and a bush behind him. But for some reason, I was being super cautious that day. I'm like, all right, I know he's in his mid 30s, but I'm going to range him again. So I range him again and range him at 36 yards and pull back. And he just stands there. He has no idea we're there. And he's essentially completely broadside and let an arrow fly, and it found its mark right behind the shoulder, pretty much center mass, and blows right through him. And he takes off, and it's super steep the other face, and he kind of takes off because he has no idea what's going on and zigzags up. And in my mind, I was just like, how did he get up like that face? Like I just drilled him. But just that adrenaline, because I had kind of come over the edge. I think just him seeing me so close right after he got shot gave him enough adrenaline to just boogie up the hill, even though an arrow just went through both lungs. So he boogies up the hill, kind of goes over the crest. And like we talked about earlier, you always want to see that bull drop in eyesight. And that wasn't the case this time. So he kind of boogied up and went over the edge. And I looked at Kyle and with a little bit of I was confused. I was like, how did he even make it over the ridge?
Yeah.
But long story short, he just boogied over the ridge and was dead on its feet and went down a little bit and piled up. So it was quite the experience. You go from a calling scenario where it's a full rut fest and you have that close encounter and you come into a totally different terrain and it's wide open and completely spot and stock and no calls and have essentially a similar end result. You have a bull down and you have meat in the freezer and you're punched a tag, but just totally different scenarios and tactics.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, congratulations. What
Yeah,
kind of bow are you
thank
shooting,
you.
Corey?
Matthews as well.
Okay.
I'm shooting the phase 4 and was shooting day 6 arrows. And I really like it. Also forgiving, feel comfortable with it. It's the second year I've been running that same bow and no complaints. I've ran several different bows throughout the years, Prime, PSE, Hoyt. And similar to what we're talking about with the elk calls, it's just what fits you, what feels good when you go shoot all the bows and you feel comfortable with. And I mean, confidence is everything out there. So definitely feel good with that bow.
Nice. Well, congratulations again. What a fun story. 4-hour bake in the sun. Would have killed a lesser man, I'm sure, but you got him. That was cool. The long wait. What a good story to relate to people, myself included. I feel like I'm kind of getting back into archery, so I'm having to, refine and remember and recall all my tactics I learned from my dad when I was a kid, but just the patience to sit and wait on the periphery and not call. We talked a lot about that in my elk hunt this year. I think I'm very conservative with my calls because I like to retain the element of surprise. And I only use the call as a tool for very specific reasons. And I even had one of my employees came up with me this year and spent a day with me. And he had never elk hunted before, actually, and he never hunted with me. So he definitely didn't know what he was in for. And he blew a call without my permission, right? Because I'm very deliberate with my calls. He blew a call without my permission. I turned and gave him a dirty look. And he's like, oh, okay, I screwed up. I said, yeah, don't do that. I'm very conservative with my calls because there's a time and a place and a purpose, but then retaining the element of surprise, which you chose to do, is a very smart, seasoned veteran archery tactic that, I hope that I remember to use and do the same kind of thing you did when I'm in that situation. On the periphery, just sit and wait, be patient, wait for your opportunity. And it took you over 4 hours. So what a great story. Both you guys, great hunts so far.
Yeah, it's
I'm so excited. We got a third hunt to talk about, right? The first two were great, man. I feel like I'm right there with you.
It's a little
stuff.
crazy for us, for Corey and I with the calling because we cut our teeth over here hunting Roosevelt's, on the Coast Range of Washington, which it's thicker than snot, and you're usually not gonna kill a bull unless you call. So that's been a pretty big transition for us as we've moved east, hunting mountain states and hunting New Mexico, hunting Arizona, hunting Wyoming, Montana. Like Corey is. There's not always a place for calls, especially if the bulls are being vocal on their own. If they're being vocal on their own and you can close that gap before you ever make a sound, I mean, what a great opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas over here where we started, they don't, Roosevelts just don't vocalize on their own very often. So that's why people don't like to hunt them very much. Is you'll go out on September 18th and be out an hour before daylight, and you won't hear a single bugle sometimes. So it's a more challenging game. But yeah, like you said, there's a time and a place for calls, and we've had to adjust to that as we've moved into other states outside of where we started.
I think that's a big mistake, new people make to elk hunting, or guys who are just coming out, maybe doing it for the first time, and the first couple times. If you watch enough videos, TV or YouTube, you kind of come away with the impression that everybody's just out there calling all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really not the case. Once you blow your call, now they know you're there. Even if they think you're an elk, they still know you're there, and they've registered your location. They triangulate your position perfectly with incredible precision. So once you give up that element of surprise, now you've got to contend with that. So it's got to be the right tactic at the right time. So kudos to you. That's cool. I'm glad that all that worked out for you, and just smart hunting.
No, I appreciate it, and definitely agree with you on that. Brian and I talk about this often when we're talking about elk calling. Is obviously it helps to sound good, but what you're saying and when you're saying it is more important than the quality of your sound.
Mm-hmm.
And
what
understanding
you're saying, what you're saying and when you say it. Yeah.
And understanding the scenario, if the bull's by itself, if it's got cows, all of those factors that play, if they're already talking, like you mentioned, there's no reason to necessarily make an elk call.
Right.
All of those factors that go into it are I would say was the biggest learning curve for me, was just understanding how to use calls. You can make the right sound, but when to use them, and understanding the herd dynamic, so to speak.
100%.
When you're in the red zone. So
for us, you're saying different things. There's a language, right? So you got different bugles, different ways of communicating with a bugle, and different ways of communicating with cow calls, and then putting it all together. Raking means something. I mean, it all means something different. And understanding the language is key. I think you were talking about, vocal bulls. If you're new to this stuff, or just, haven't thought through it, the first time you hear a bull, what's the first thing a guy wants to do? He wants to rip a call right back at him. Well, even if you sound amazing, that bull now knows you're there, and they're registering that amongst all the other stimulus in their environment, you included. So now if you make a move, they're always watching right out of the corner of their eye. So when you're making a move now, they just have their eye on you, versus that element of surprise. So I think a mistake a lot of people make is calling too much, too often. And clearly you guys know what you're doing. It's exciting to listen to you, and people are going to learn a little bit listening to you too. So can't wait to hear this next story. Did I cut you off? I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
Oh, no, you're good.
Oh.
Let's hear the next story. The next hunt.
Oh, well, my wife is amazing. We'll start there, because there was another short break and then I'm headed to another Western state. So, Missy and her parents, I'm spoiled. I got great family here, and taking care of everyone, and allowing me to travel all across the West. So a quick turn and burn again. I come home for 5-ish days, and then I head to Idaho, which is a hunt that we've been on collectively for several times now. So it was nice to go somewhere where I was familiar, where I'd actually put boots on the ground, and had experience during the season dates. But that soon showed to not necessarily be that beneficial. It was an odd year, in a sense of just elk movement and what we were observing and whatnot. So
what's the date of this hunt now?
Yeah,
what's the date?
We got there. It would have been October 12th.
Okay, we're into October, mid-October, so just a couple weeks ago.
Into rifle season.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Right into rifle season. We had some deer tags in hand. So there's 3 of us in one group. So we had 2 deer tags and then 2 elk tags. So I went there with an elk tag. And then we also had a bigger group that we were sharing base camp with Jason and Tyson and Dave. And so they had a couple elk tags and deer tags. And we divide and conquered. So we looked at the maps again, scoured Google Earth and OnX, and based off of all of our experience in the area, decided, hey, we're going to start over here with the spike camp, and we're going to go in with 4 days worth of gear. And then Jason and Tyson ended up about 5 miles as the crow flies with a similar process and similar in spiking out for 4 or 5 days. So we our thought there was we're going to bring in enough gear to last to the second day of elk season. So we're in there early. We have deer tags. The deer season's already started. And then Tuesday, October 15th, the elk season was going to start. So we brought in enough food to last us to the end of Wednesday. And our thought there was just we're going to have a couple days before season, really scouring the hillsides and understanding what elk were in the area and what elk may not be in the area. And then also time to potentially put a buck or 2 down. So we get in there, and on the first full day of hunting, right at daylight, we're looking over a big area, a glassy knob that I've sat at before and seen quite a few critters. And we glass up a really good buck. When I was looking through the spotter, I didn't realize how good of a buck it was until later on, but definitely a shooter buck. And I told Corey Ford, hey, we got a good one here, and get the all-in adapter on him. And he's working this hillside across from us, and he's about 1,200 yards. And he's got the tag, and he's like, yeah, this is a shooter. So let's make a plan. And I kept tabs on him and just kept following him to his bed. And we essentially bedded that buck. And I stayed tight, just kind of keeping tabs on him. And Corey Ford and Taryn made a stalk. And man, how this all unfolded was quite the story. I'm sitting there watching this all unfold. It's about a 4 or 5 hour stalk to get around, just because it was where he ended up bedding was like 1,400 yards. So it was either that or like a 200 yard shot, because you're going to be on the same hillside. And so they make
not a lot of other options.
no other options. So they make the approach, and I'm watching this all unfold, and I can tell they're between 200 and 300 yards, but the buck's still bedded, and they're really having a hard time just because of how steep the hillside is to see him in his bed. Well, shortly after this, a coyote flies into the scene and starts yipping and howling and runs within 20 yards of Taryn and Corey Ford. Gets this buck on high alert. He stands up and he's like, I'm out of here, kind of thing. And he turns in a way. This buck was in a ravine, and Corey Ford was on this ridge. And on the opposite ridge, this buck just starts running onto the other face. And it actually panned out in a great way, because now it puts the buck in eyesight of Corey Ford and puts the buck at about 250 yards. But as it was unfolding, I was like, no, like, this is not happening. Like, we just spent all day, and now this coyote comes flying into the scene and might ruin this scenario. So the buck stops at about 250 yards and gives Corey a good broadside shot, and he drills him. Ends up being about a 175 to 180 class buck in mountain country. And it was the a very cool experience, not only just to kind of see it all unfold and watch it from the opposite hillside. So a great way to start off a hunt. It's a pretty good buck for the area that we're hunting for sure.
Yeah, sounds like it. Did that yote know you were there? Were they yipping at you by any chance?
No, not from my knowledge. I think there's a lot of coyotes in there. Later on in the hunt, I literally had a coyote run within 20 yards of me too. I don't think they had any idea that we were there. Not quite sure what he was all riled up about, but he almost blew it and then helped us.
Yeah.
So
So that was a mule deer.
Yep. So that was a mule deer, and we ended up. Now we're into the day before elk season, and we're seeing a lot of elk, but we're not seeing any raghorn bulls, mature bulls. We're seeing pockets of cows that have 2 or 3 spikes with them. And in this area, in our experience, with the dates and especially the weather we had, it was colder temps. We usually see at least some raghorn bulls and mature bulls still with the cow groups, at least some of them. And we weren't seeing any of that. So a little concerning, but hey, let's just keep hammering the glass and see what we pick up. And we didn't pick up any other groups in there that had raghorn bulls or mature bulls. But through that process, we've ended up picking up another buck, and we have another deer tag in the group. So we got Taryn set up on this buck, and she was able to take one at about 350 yards. And now we got the deer tags down, and she was beyond excited, and got some meat in the freezer. And so deer tags are filled, and tomorrow is the elk opener. So
yeah.
It's
exciting leading up to the elk hunt.
Oh yeah. So we were like, we got obviously some confidence going there. We would ideally wanted to see some elk, right? We got some targets, but how do you complain when you got some meat in the freezer and some tags are punched? No, we switched gears, and we really were starting to think, okay, we've spent some time here. We spent a lot of time behind glass. We haven't seen any mature bulls, and we haven't seen any raghorns. So what
do you make of that? What do you make of that at this point? What are you thinking?
Yeah, at this point, there's a little bit of confusion because I've looked over.
This is a place you've been to before. Unlike the other 2 hunts you just talked about, those were new areas, new country to you. But you're in a place you've hunted before, a place you've seen mature bulls this time of year before.
Yep.
So you know this hunt, you know this area, but now you're not seeing mature bulls. What do you make of it?
So at this point, like I mentioned, a little bit of confusion, but knowing our previous experience, my thought is, hey, we're missing some bulls. Like there's way too many cows, spikes. We're looking at 6-7 different groups of elk. There's got to be either a bachelor group or some lone bulls that are in the area, but we're just missing them because they're not with the big groups, and they're not, the cows aren't giving them away essentially. And so we keep glassing and spend more time behind the glass. And Tuesday is the opener. It comes and goes, and it's just more of the same. Just more cow groups, more spikes. And so this is when we decide to pick up spike camp. Let's get both mule deer packed out. Let's get spike camp packed out. Let's look at the maps, and let's hit some other spots that we've seen elk in the past had success. And we've seen enough here to know that it's not going to be as productive as we were hoping. And so we come out and we switch gears, and it's more of the same all the way until the last day of our second to last day of the hunt. It's cow pockets that have spikes. At the end of the day, at the end of this hunt, I looked over 20 different groups of elk, and only one of them had either a raghorn or a mature bull with it, which is not what we've experienced in the past.
Yeah.
And so we
I
get
mean,
to
that
the
many
second.
cows, you think there'd
Yep.
be some of those cows would be in heat. There'd be some of the bulls want to cycle in. Maybe some want to take a break from the September rut, but you think others would be cycling in. Like, that just sounds crazy. The number of
Weird.
animals you're seeing to not be seeing those mature bulls.
And there was two other groups in the unit that we downloaded with once we got back into service, to kind of just see what they were seeing and hearing. And the one thing that stuck out to me was when there was a bull or multiple bulls with the cow groups, they were being vocal, which is very much our experience as well, as in the morning. And so for us to not hear any bugles at all just reassured me in my mind that we weren't necessarily missing any bulls in the area we were just at, because the other groups and the other people were having experience with was those bulls were definitely bugling and being vocal, given the dates and temperature and whatnot. So
Yeah.
we move into a whole another area. We get to a high point in the unit that we've spent some time in, where we've had some luck spotting groups. This high point is far. It's removed from where you would be able to make a quick play, as I was explaining it. It's, hey, I'm going to get a 40,000 foot view, or
Yeah.
I'm going to
You're
get as
there
high as I
solely
can.
to take a look. Yeah.
Yep. But I need to find elk, and this is
Yeah.
my best way to find elk.
Right. And
so we get up there, and we got a fresh cover of snow. It's freezing, and it took to the very end of that evening. We probably had 30 minutes left of daylight, and those koa spotters are amazing. I'm running an 88 millimeter, and with the snow backdrop, I was able to pick up this herd a little under 5 miles out. So they were out on a knob, all feeding from right to left, and it gave me a good enough backdrop where I was trying to dissect each head, which is so far away to be trying to do that. But the pure white backdrop gave me just enough where I could see on one of the elk that it was definitely at least a raghorn or a mature bull. And my imagination was going, okay, if it's that far away and it looks like a raghorn, it's probably a mature bull. But
Sure.
So we had a target. So we have a herd spotted. We look at we go back to base camp that night. We look at the maps, and how do we access this herd? What is going to be our play? So we found a good access point that put us we were going to be able to unload a quad and dirt bike and drive a little farther down this trail, park those, do about probably have like a mile and a half hike. And then we were really going to have to slow down and pump the brakes, and then start picking apart the hillside as we kind of went around each fold, because we were going to be on the same side, the same face as the elk. So we get over there, and man, exactly as I explained earlier, when you that time of year, in our experience, you get close, those temps, we get in there, we're within 500 yards, we haven't even seen them yet, and boom, there's a bugle. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, we found a bull finally. So we're waiting. That's a big herd. We figure 40 plus elk. And so we're waiting till all of them kind of get over. And really our play was, we're just going to dog this herd until they get close to their bedding or they're bedded, just because they were really strung out. And the more dominant raspy bugle sounded out ahead. And so if we really were going to want to get a shot at that bull, we were going to have to kind of take it slow, dog the herd, and then hopefully put him to bed and get a shot. So we make that play, and This was probably 9 a.m. when we located them, and we essentially follow them to their bed, and we get to where they're bedded, and the majority of them are. Some are still up and feeding, and it's about 11:30. And we have a mature bull bedded in the group, and he's at about 500 yards, but he's in this standing timber that's all burnt. And for me, when I ranged him, I was like, 500 yards, let's go. Like, we're in tight. Like, we have the utmost confidence in the systems that you provide us with. Like, we're in the red zone. This is what we've been trying to find all trip. But how the vegetation essentially laid out, there was all these branches on the way within that 500 yards that just didn't give us a shot. And he was bedded in a way where his vitals were also covered up. And so we had to sit there and watch him and the spotter. And ultimately we made 3 different plays. And what I mean by that is we actually got up, went up and over the ridge, so we were out of sight, and then came back over the ridge at a different vantage point 3 different times with the wind in our favor.
Trying to get the right angle.
And trying to get the right angle. And we couldn't ever get in a spot with all of those elks.
Scared the shit out of me. Go ahead.
With all of those elk, I mean, you have so many eyeballs. You have ears. I mean, you got the wind to worry about. So we made multiple efforts.
That's a lot of moving, right? A lot of moving around with all those critters there. And how many total animals are there on that ridge side?
We figured 40 plus. So, and they're pretty scattered on how they're bedded. And then obviously just with their nature and how their mannerisms, they're all facing different ways to protect the herd. And so at the same time, it's cold temperatures, so they're not all bedded at all times. There's ones that are up feeding and moving. Most of them were bedded, then they would bed down, then other ones would get up. And so we're trying to navigate all that. And we were within 500 yards on 3 different occasions, which is crazy to think with a rifle in hand that you couldn't get a shot.
Yeah.
But we were working through all of those angles, and long story short, we're now at about 4:30. So this is an all-day thing now, and we're sitting at our 3rd approach, and the majority of the herd has now got up, but of course not the mature bull, and they're feeding from right to left below us. The wind is still good. So most of them are disappearing over this fold, and all of a sudden, the whole herd that had gone past the fold comes running back over. And there was something in the ravine that they were feeding into that they did not like. And so at this point, they run back into our picture and then start feeding again. But there was too much commotion. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they all stand up and they all blow out. And we're just like, no, like all day effort within 500 yards, second to last day. And it just seemed like it was.
You're like this close.
Yeah, it just seemed like a done deal almost in my mind.
Yeah.
And with a rifle, and for it to just all kind of blow up. And one thing I picked up on is just observing these elk in that season is it just seems like that mature bull is the last on its feet in the evening. And you just have to navigate all of the other elk getting up and feeding. And then you have to really wait out that herd bull, which can be difficult at times when those other elk are moving all around you, especially with the wind and whatnot.
Yeah.
So
it'd be easy to get busted.
And then
thing,
on top of that, Corey and I have been to this area before, and it's a general tag. So there are plenty of other hunters, and at any one time you're getting things messed up by other people too. So you have all these factors on these general public land tags.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if anybody was
so
having the same kind of experience you were, locating bulls, they're doing the same thing you are, getting to a high spot, taking inventory. There's the one bull left in the unit. Let's all go after him.
Yeah. And like Brian mentioned, you're weighing patience versus, okay, well, what's the pressure going to do? This is the right thing to do if there's no pressure. But when you have all this pressure, how do you factor that in? The unknown almost. So
there's a time to get aggressive, right? There's a time to be patient and time to get aggressive. I'm sure all that was going through your mind, like what's going on here.
Yeah. And of course, during this time frame, I have an elk in the freezer, and I really wanted to take a mature bull. And so during all this, though, a 3-point raghorn, several spikes, a 5-point raghorn, all within a clean shot. And then you start thinking, okay, should I have taken that shot? The season's about to end. I don't know about this, but it's really hard when you have a mature bull bedded roughly 500 yards out to make that decision. So, we sat there on the hillside knowing we had a long hike out and only one day left. So we go back to base camp, and it was a quiet drive back, knowing that we've been struggling to find elk, and one day left, but we regrouped.
But no fault of your own, right? I mean, you guys didn't do anything wrong. Just somebody burgered them up and kind of just ruined your opportunity. But no fault of yours, but you're a little upset, right? You're a little frustrated by it all.
Very much so. I mean, you got a little bit of our background. We're pretty competitive people. And so just the fact, even though you feel like, hey, I don't know what else I necessarily could have done, you're still that competitive edge sitting in, and you're frustrated, but you're still in the game. You got a day left. So you gotta forget about that. And we get back to base camp, and we look at OnX, and there's other areas I've been in the past that held elk, but we all three sit down and we're like, what do we want to do tomorrow? Because we got 2 elk tags, and we all three agreed. We know that herd's in there. We know they're not going to go too far, and we know there's multiple bulls in there. And so let's try to go relocate those elk. And so we go back in, we make a similar play. We work this main ridge system that has all these other ridges that come off of it. And no bugles, don't put eyes on elk. And it is now 4 p.m. And we have 3.5 hours till dark on the last evening.
So we jump right to 4 p.m., which means nothing happened.
Nothing.
That whole day. Okay.
The whole day.
Here we
hiking.
are. Last day, we were right at 4 p.m. Okay.
It's hiking.
So that must have been
glassing.
A shitty day. That must have sucked bad.
That's a good summary right there. Yeah, it was a good summary.
You're probably thinking, because I can relate, because I had a last day bull this year too. I'm thinking, my hunt's over. Should I just call it? Should I just back out of here? Go back to camp. I'm exhausted. I'm sure there's a lot of things going through your head.
Oh yeah. Yep. And with all these drives, you have a lot of conversations with friends, especially the guys at Tall Timber, just seeing out the hunts. You never know what's going to happen. Like, just give it your all. Like, when you get back home quickly after, you're like, man, I wish I'm back out in the field, even though it sucks in the moment. It's just all those things that are going through. Yeah. And so I actually send the 3 guys an inReach message, and I say, I'm sending it. I'm dropping it into a hellhole. This is the last effort. Like, we're just giving it all. And so what we decided to do is, we knew that the elk should be in the same general area as the day prior, but we couldn't locate them all day. And so we were going to split up, which isn't ideal for filming. That's why we hadn't done that yet. But hey, we're down to the wire here. So we split up, and I'm going to work off this one side, and I'm going to essentially side hill and drop and kind of work, almost still hunt, work my way through these timber patches and angle down to the very bottom, which is about a 1,1200 foot drop. And they're going to stay towards the top, but side hill on the backside, work their way to the quad and dirt bike. And then after dark, they'll come pick me up at some point on the trail. Well, we split up, and I make it probably 3/4 the way down the hillside. So I've dropped roughly 1,000 feet, and I don't remember what time it is, but it was definitely late. I mean, I started hiking at 4, and I hear a bugle above me, and it's super faint. And so I know it's up above and probably off towards the top, but off the other side. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have to climb all the way back up here. If this is my last effort, like I've seen no elk and I'm running out of daylight. So I strap the rifle. I take my pack off. I strap my rifle to my pack. I get my trekking poles out, and I just go. And I just told the guys, I just prayed, and I said, God, please give me the strength to make it in time, because I was really, really running out of daylight quick. And we live at sea level. We're definitely not at sea level. So I'm just huffing and puffing. And I get up to the top, and I never would have got this bull if it wasn't for them being vocal. They just kept giving away their location. I really didn't even have to pause, because they just kept bugling, so I could readjust based off the sound. And I get up there, and I get around this knob, and boom, there's 2 spikes, a couple cows, a 3-point, and I believe I looked at the herd bull. Well, now I'm really running out of daylight, and I'm about 150, 200 yards away, but I'm in this really open terrain where I really don't have an ability to get a solid rest, and I don't have time to get my tripod out. And I'm scouring. Well, I was like, there's no tomorrow. So if I bump them, I bump them. Like, I have to be aggressive here. Daylight's running out. Who cares if I bump them? As I just need to try to get a shot. So I move forward. Well, I end up bumping 2 of the spikes, and they moved away, but the wind was perfect, and they really didn't know what they saw or heard. And they kind of take the herd bull. He kind of goes around the corner, and I'm like, dang it. Like, I just climbed all the way up. The herd bull's out of the frame, running out of daylight. There's a couple spikes in front of me in the 3-point. Well, through all of this, I get an inReach message from the other group, and Taryn shot a bull farther back. They say, I just get a message that says big bull down. And so now I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to shoot these spikes in front of me or this 3-point, knowing all the work that I got to go back to. And I already have an elk in the freezer. Shortly after that thought, a 5-point comes into the frame, bugling, pushing a cow. And I'm like, okay, this'll do. So I like get set up, and daylight's running, getting darker and darker, and there's elk in and out of the frame, and I'm using my binos to check heads, but then coming up with my scope to verify and whatnot. And finally, I get close enough. I'm about 120 to 150 yards away from this 5-point, and he turns in a way where he's quartering away from me. And I get my breath as best I can. I take deep breaths. I try to calm myself down from the climb, the adrenaline, all of it. And I actually have to I sit there, take my time, and I actually have to take a freehand shot. And I shoot, and I immediately take my rifle, pull it back up, and look, and I can tell, like, if you watch elk or any animal when they get hit, like, he didn't immediately drop, he didn't like stagger, but you know that, like, he's very woozy, like he definitely got hit.
Kind of
Yes,
got a little bit
very
of a
much
stun
so.
look to him. Yeah.
Yep, like he definitely got hit pretty hard. And so I can tell that, and but none of the elk move. Like I'm 120, 150 yards. I hit this elk good, and none of the elk scatter. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I put another one in, and he kind of moves at an angle where I can get another shot in him. He's on his feet, so I want to take that shot, and I shoot. We'll come to find out that one I actually missed, but all the elk scatter. And at this point, I'm really running out of daylight, and so I actually walk straight over there at this point, and there's the bull. He's bedded. He's definitely hit good, but not great. And so I put one in him to put him out of his misery. And right then and there, I just like the complete, like, I told the guys, I just like an adrenaline like dump. I just like, I can't believe this. Like, this was like the beyond a long shot. Like last night, last evening, it seemed like last seconds. And to be able to not only like be able to harvest that bull, but then also Taryn, like 3 ridges over, also got a bull.
Yeah, just minutes earlier.
Yeah, and we were like, oh, I mean, we thought it was over.
Right. What are the chances? What are the chances?
Yeah.
That's a Hail Mary. You
Yeah,
guys pulled it out of your ass. That's fantastic.
pretty much. It just
Wow.
to go through that and see that many elk and observe as many herds as we did, and on the last evening, the last minutes, last seconds, to be able to punch those 2 elk tags, it was definitely it was a huge big feeling of accomplishment to be able to do that, but quickly realized how much work is ahead between the two elk that are down. So
Yeah. What a great story, man. Congratulations. That's fantastic. So let me recap. So you go to a place you've been to before. You're excited, you're pumped up, and you're in Idaho. You're expecting to see bulls and hear bulls, but you don't. You kind of get skunked when it comes to mature bulls.
Yep.
And you don't know what to do. You don't want to invest any more time in this area. You realize the rut's happening. It's not happening here. Definitely been in similar circumstances. I know the rut's happening, but it's not happening here. You knew the same thing. So you regroup. And this is an important lesson for guys. You got to a high spot just to take inventory. Like you said, this wasn't a high spot that we could make a tactical move from, but a high spot where we could at least take inventory, regroup, right? We got to figure some shit out. Where are the bulls at? And by virtue of that, you find critters far, far away. You make your way in, and now you're hunting them. They get boogered up. Maybe they got boogered up more than you thought, right? Because you said, well, let's go back in there again tomorrow. But they might have got pushed a little bit more. Probably some other crackers in there, right? Running around in their hunting clothes, pushing them around and making things difficult. So, but you persevere on the last day, right? Physically, mentally, right? So many people can relate to that, and you push and push and push right to the last minute. And look what the net result of that was. A fine bull in the last minutes or seconds, as you said. Yeah, what a good time. So I don't know if you've heard my podcast and my recap yet, but I shot a bull in the last minutes, last seconds. And kind of like you, when I shot that bull, my wife happened to be with me that day. Anyway, you could see, I hope you see the podcast. I really want you to see it. But after I shot that bull and I turned to her like, I couldn't believe that just happened. And no sooner than I kind of collect myself, I realized it's too dark to shoot now. And I mean, I was literally in those last minutes or last seconds of the hunt, just like you, 14-day hunt, and took it to the wire. And it, that last day, I almost talked myself out of, just call it, man. I had such a good hunt, such a good time. I've got elk in the freezer. Maybe I just call it, but I just kept pushing and just said, no, I'm just going to wait this thing out and go to the last day and the last minutes of the day. And that's where I harvested, man. So I can totally relate to that hunt. What a great story, great hunt, great tactics, fantastic tenacity on your part to just keep pushing and keep going, man. That's great. And then you guys turned up with 2 bulls at the end. So yeah, what was that like? Any any stories or what do you need to relay about the pack out of those two bulls
Well,
at
I
night?
process, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's dark when I start. I mean, pitch black when I start processing mine, and Corey and Taryn started processing Taryn's bull, and through. I mean, we're having to communicate through InReach, so sometimes that can be a little difficult. But we made a plan that they're going to process Taryn's and hang that meat, and we're going to come in a different way the next morning to get that, and then they're going to work their way to me, and then I got my bull processed and all deboned, and already had my pack loaded with my load, and then had two sets of bags for them, and they loaded up their packs, and we made the jaunt back towards the quad and the dirt bike, and we didn't get back to base camp until about 3:30 in the morning, and knew that was only one bull, so we had to
Oh,
like,
man.
we also were hoping to get home on Sunday, so we're like, well, let's try to get 5 hours of sleep. So we set an alarm and go back in the next day, and it was an area we hadn't been before, so of course we couldn't get as close as we thought we were going to be able to with the dirt bike and the quad. So then that pack out took a lot longer than expected. So yeah, all in all, to get both bulls out, we 3:30 the night prior, and then the next day we were in there about 10 a.m. and we didn't get that one out till about 5 p.m. So
Wow.
they were definitely sleep deprived and sore legs, but all tags were punched, full freezers, and we were pretty much living off excitement and adrenaline getting home.
Yeah. Great memories. It's the worst pack outs that make the best memories.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
Paul, I'll have to say we're probably the only ones that, you guys help us get these phenomenal rifles set up for, any possible long range scenarios. And then Corey, 2 years in a row, shoots bulls, under 150 yards offhand.
Yeah. We're gonna get him a 30-30 for next season.
I would. Iron sight. See if he likes a iron sight. Iron sight. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic, man. Guys, that was great. I love that. That was a great recap. I'm excited now because we decided we're just going to recap these 3 hunts, but there's 2 more to recap with y'all. One of them hasn't taken place yet, but you're coming to Arizona for an archery bull hunt. That's a mid-November archery elk hunt. So that's a good tag and a great unit. And I'm going to see if I can't get out, maybe get Brett out, maybe some of the boys, and just try to be extra eyes for you. That's going to be a spot and stock, right? Unless you decide to sit water, but at least in the mornings and the afternoons will be a spot and stock for sure. And boy, if we can come in and help you and hang out with you, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be awesome. In our experience, more eyes the better, and especially in Arizona on those late hunts. And I'm not much for sitting. Probably listen to the other guys. Like, it's probably the best tactic at times, but man, I'm antsy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't sit water too long, and so spot and stock is definitely going to be the preference there, and really looking forward to it. We've had nothing but good hunts in Arizona, and man, you guys grow them different down there.
Well, and I think it's been a good year for antler growth. I've looked over a lot of bulls already this season, and then the heck with my own experience. Everybody else is dropping bulls in Arizona. It looks like bulls have reached their genetic potential this year. So great year for antler growth. So definitely something to be looking forward to. Great stories, guys.
Yeah, and I think, the awesome thing for your listeners is that they don't have to sit here and just listen to us talk. They'll be able to go and watch these hunts unfold.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure we'll get into that, but we have a full season of Elk Obsession from last year on the YouTube channel right now.
Right.
So, it'll be exciting for guys to be able to connect the dots with these stories and then what we have coming as well.
So this year's Elk Obsession, as you call it, is a five hunt series.
Yeah. And some of these, as we get into editing these hunts, they might take a couple episodes to kind of really let the story unfold. But yeah, we'll have, at least 5+ videos new on the channel from this season.
Nice. Nice. Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you guys spending some time with me this afternoon, sharing these stories. So exciting. Yeah. As exciting as the stories are, I can't imagine how exciting the video is going to be. So I can't wait to see it. And again, everybody, this is Tall Timber Productions on YouTube and Instagram, Facebook. So look them up, check out what they're doing. These guys are badasses and they love to hunt as much as anybody. And they're damn good at it too. So you got to check out what they're doing.
I appreciate it, Paul. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and congratulations on your bull. I started listening to your hunt, and I'm looking forward to finishing it out. But congratulations on a nice bull with the bow this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have a cameraman like you, big shots, but at least I did a little brain dump and spilled the beans on all the action and the fun. It was a really great hunt. So Brett and I are headed to New Mexico to kill some mule deer here next week. And then right after that, we might come out and help Corey, see how that goes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good luck on your hunt, Paul.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Bloodline Podcast by Precision Hunting Supply. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks again.